Hey. So today we're going to be walking through Apache Airflow, which is an open source Python-based orchestrator. We're going to walk through some of its core features, how you might use it. Then we're going to jump into the UI, start having a bit of a look around and see how those concepts relate to reality. And hopefully by the end of this, anybody who's not seen Airflow before is familiar enough with it to kind of understand what it does and when you might use it when building pipelines. So what are some of Airflow's defining features? Well, most of all, it's an orchestrator, so it's obviously going to have some kind of scheduling component in there. Beyond that, you're expecting tasks within pipelines. Now these are known as operators to tasks and DAGs to pipelines within Airflow. That's kind of their names for these concepts. It is Python native. All of Airflow is written in Python, so you can jump into the code and look through it if you really want to. There's a web interface for ease of use. You're not expected to learn a CLI and have to run things that way. There's pluggable executors. So what this means is if you want to run your compute on ECS or Kubernetes or something similar, you can switch between them and deploy Airflow in a few different ways. And beyond that, there's the usual retries, alerting, secrets management that you really would expect with any orchestrator. So getting straight into the Airflow UI, this is their kind of homepage. And as you can see, it's just like a nice summary page of all things you might want to know related to your pipeline health. But let's start looking at what a DAG and an operator really looks like in the UI. So if we go into DAGs, you can see we have a whole list of example ones. And if we look in here, this is an example of an Airflow DAG. We see that there is a whole bunch of tabs related to the runs, the tasks within the DAG or pipeline, whichever you want to call it, and all sorts of other controls, bells and whistles that we may find useful, depending on how complicated we're going to get with this. This may look a little unfamiliar at first, but if we toggle this view here, this is probably more what people are expecting to see in a pipeline, and this is a DAG, where we have operators, in this case bash operators, which are essentially just tasks within a pipeline that have dependencies and all kind of connect to each other. As you can tell, this probably isn't the most exciting pipeline in the world. So what other kind of operators or integrations are available? If we look over into the docs, we can see a whole heap of available providers or task definitions, whatever you want to call it, that are out there and available for Airflow. And they're the usual suspects. They're Snowflake, they're Slack, they're all sorts of other things. But given it's Python based, if one doesn't exist that you need, it's pretty straightforward to write your own as long as you're comfortable writing and maintaining custom Python code. But then the obvious next question is, what do I do with these operators in order to define a DAG? Well, Airflow works based on Python files. So every DAG has a Python file, or one Python file can generate many DAGs, depending on how you like to structure your code. We can see it here in the UI. This is the Python representation of my DAG. You can see how we use operators to specify the commands and their arguments. And then Airflow has this little syntax that is used to define the kind of dependencies within your pipeline. Now, there are alternative ways to represent this, but the most common one you'll see is these kind of double sign operators to say like, run this last, depends on also run this. So this one will lead into that one, which is pretty easy to read in Python code as well. And if I want to run my DAG, there's various ways to do that. The easiest is to just click this button up here, and you can see I can pass it various parameters if I need to. I can choose to backfill for a series of dates and specify a whole bunch of stuff if my pipeline is that complicated. But for now, you can just assume that runs. It's usually going to be on a schedule rather than trigger through the UI. Now, when a DAG runs, sometimes it's not just the tasks themselves you care about, it's the actual assets those tasks produce. And Airflow gives you a way to kind of browse the assets that are produced within your pipelines, see where they're getting produced, and also be able to rerun them if you need to, just by jumping into the assets pane over here on the left-hand side. And you can think of this as a step towards more kind of event-driven orchestration patterns. If we were to click into an asset, you can see we get this whole other DAG of kind of dependencies and downstream use cases of our asset, where it came from, the different runs that produced it, and all sorts of other metadata about how that specific piece of data or file or whatever it is came to be. And if we jump back into our very basic DAG, let's imagine we're building one a bit more complicated for ourselves, and we want run me1 to pass some information to run after loop, like a timestamp or a summary statistic or something like that. Well, in Airflow, these are known as XCOM values, and you can find these by clicking over into Browse and XCOMs, and here you have a full list of all XCOM values being produced by your pipelines. So you can see the DAG it came from, the task that produced it, the specific run instance that created this specific value, and actually the value itself over here. So this allows you to then pass information from one task to the next, as long as you're ready to read it from the XCOM values. And that's pretty much all there is to creating and running DAGs in Airflow. But what if we're a higher power and we're a bit of an admin? Let's have a quick look at some of the functionality we have to do as an admin. So first up, we've got variables. These are exactly what they say on the tin. You can specify variables under key names and then read them in your pipelines, DAGs, or wherever you kind of need them, really. We also have pools, which is compute pools. These are what you can use to try and specify how Airflow uses the execution resource it has underneath. So if I have two pipelines and they both take a lot of compute and I don't want them competing for that in my underlying resource, I can put them into two different pools so that I say, this one, you use that compute over there, this one, you use that compute over there. Don't fight for resource with each other. And finally, we have connections, which is going to be useful to any admin, because this is where you can come in and specify the normal like email connections or specific PyPy indexes that you're going to be using in your specific deployment. So this will allow you to send alerts or do things like that to your own internal tooling. And that's pretty much it for Airflow. You can schedule pipelines, you can define them as Python code, upload the files to your storage, and simply read them into the user interface. That's it. So thanks for watching. Let me know if I missed anything, and see you next time.